Old business. A, approval of probationary raises for Emily Amico, Board of Health, and Ronald Fraser in facilities. As you'll recall at our meeting last week, there were 2 probationary reviews. They were approved in principle by the board. We took that up. But we just needed Ms. Pasicane in payroll to do some calculations, since these reviews had slightly different calculations than the other ones. So for Ms. Amico, we have the public health nurse, we have a current pay rate of $35.50 an hour, and that would go to $36.49 an hour. That's a 2.8% raise. And Ronald Fraser, maintenance technician, current pay rate of $26.75. And the proposed pay rate with a 2.8% increase would be $27.50. These are just slightly different than the figures you had in front of you last week. The 2 revised cover sheets were uploaded. Thank you, Ms. Pasicane and payroll. And these were made available to the board. So the chair would entertain a motion to approve those 2 raises.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
All right. All in favor? This will be a roll call vote. Mr. Dietz?
Yes.
Ms. Jasinski?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative. Those are approved. With thanks to Ms. Pasicane for uploading those documents. Right along to 3B, employee performance evaluations. This is a continuing discussion of the process and the issues, and an assignment of personnel board liaisons to departments and to the chairs and committees with employees. So you'll recall last week we had several folks attending. We received some specific feedback from one of the department heads, from Mr. Parent, about what meets expectations means to him. And then following the meeting, I received feedback from 2 department heads that has not been put on the record. And I thank both of them, Ms. LeFrancois, the director of the Senior Center, and Ms. Castle, the director of Youth and Family Service. They both reached out to me. Pam was a telephone call and Sarah was by email. And I asked them to come here today to speak to you. I think it's really important. The board has had its say based on documentation, but we really haven't had a whole lot of interaction and heard from our department heads. So with that, Ms. LeFrancois has an ongoing event happening at the Senior Center. So I told her I would put her at the top of the meeting and I would give her the floor if she is here. I see that she is here. And I welcome her to unmute and to make her comments. And thank you for being here, Pam.
Hi, everybody. Good morning or afternoon. I just reached out to Betsy because I just wanted to chat with you guys a little bit. I've been here for a long time, 19 years, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of the history of what's happened with other personnel boards. Over the years, this subject of how reviews should be written and how they should be graded, as well as, talking about merit systems and those things, kind of how they're written, how they're graded, mixed in with raises and things like that over the years, has come up at least every 2 or 3 years. And what's happened is every time every board has a different opinion about how it should be done. Just so you know, we've been told as managers, sometimes there's too much detail. There's not enough detail. It's not lengthy enough. It should be in paragraph form, along, different things like that. And sometimes what we've been told even gets contradicted the next year about the grading and the subjectiveness of the grading. When we had a scale of 1 to 5, it was everybody's a 3 if they're doing their job well. Don't give a lot of 5s because that has to be an over the top, you've saved somebody from a burning building kind of situation. Whereas the next year I was told, wow, this person did a great job in the narrative, you should have given them a 5. So we go back and forth with different instructions from different boards over the years. And as managers, we try to do the best we can to meet the expectations of the personnel board. But I just wanted to mention that to you guys, that it has come up numerous times, as well as the form and the format of the form, and how that should be done. And that's been kind of rebooted a few times over the years. So I just wanted to let you know kind of where we're coming from that perspective. We're trying to do the absolute very best we can to meet the expectations of how the board wants them done. But it's kind of been a moving target. So that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you. We do the very best we can. We put a lot of time and effort into what we think the board expects. So it's a very subjective thing. We know our employees really very well. At least I do. I'm sure everybody else does too. I don't want to speak for other people. But we try to be as thorough and as accurate and work with those employees all year, and then put the time in on the review to make sure it's accurate. So that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to make sure that you realize that this has come up numerous times over the past years with different boards. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Any comments or questions from the board members for Ms. LaFrancois? Anybody? I found her comments eye-opening. I think I'm the longest serving member of the board. I'm going into my 4th year, and I did not realize that this was something that periodically rolls around. I hadn't heard that, although it's eye-opening, and it makes sense given that the constitution of the board changes. And so it was very helpful for me to hear her feedback, and it's something I think the board needs to discuss further. I know we rolled out the new performance tool last November. Mr. Purple was tasked with that. Thank you, Mr. Purple. And as part of his process, I believe he reported to the board that he gathered input from managers, but perhaps not all. I'm not really sure how that process worked. So maybe we can hear from him on that, but maybe there were managers. I know he didn't talk, he said he didn't talk to the boards and committees, perhaps just department heads, or maybe he invited folks to give comments and some folks didn't. And then when they actually started working with the form, then they had some input, and we can hear from our second department head who has some questions about the form. So, you know, and quite possible not everything that should have been addressed was addressed. We bear responsibility for that. We created we approved the form. So in our next go round, that would be definitely something we would want to discuss, is the form itself. Anyway, thank you, Pam. I know you have an event to get to. It doesn't look like anybody on the board has any questions for you for now. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're dismissed with the thanks of the court. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. And good luck with your event. Pam is having a drive-through event for seniors. She expects over 100 folks to drive through. You want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing today while you're here?
If you want to hear about it, I'm happy to tell you. It's we do pretty much every other week, we do a themed event drive-through where seniors sign up ahead of time, and they get a lunch and they get a goodie bag along with the theme, and the staff is outside to, you know, talk to them as they go through. We try to do it as kind of slowly as we possibly can without having a big line. So we get to see people, they get to chat with us, and they have the event on their calendar. They look forward to it. They come, and it's a really, they get, you know, today it's lasagna and meatballs, and they'll have a goodie bag, and the theme is, I wish I was on a casino bus trip. So the theme, they get a little goodie bag along with it that goes along with that theme. Some of the themes, you'll have a Halloween one. We have a breakfast one. We had one that was a chicken theme. We try to get as creative as we can. So I think there's probably 90 some odd people on this list today. So trying to reach out and make contact with people.
All right, thank you, Pam. Thanks very much.
Take care, bye.
Yep. Next up is Sarah Castle. She is with us, and Sarah reached out to me. She's had some specific questions for the board and some insights. So I'll give the floor to Sarah Castle, Director of Youth and Family Service. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
You could be a little louder.
Okay, I'm not sure. I just got a new computer. Thank you, Mr. Laflamme. And
You
I
sound
don't
good
know,
to me.
I
How
don't
about
know where
everybody
the-
else?
Yep, she's
Okay.
good.
don't know where my microphone is, so I'm just kind of hovering over my keyboard here. But thank you again for giving me a couple of minutes. I do want to reinforce what Pam had just said about department heads, working very hard on these and trying to do our best to give the personnel board what they're looking for. I thought about the evaluation form and the process after the meeting, and I had some thoughts / questions that I shared with Mrs. Rosenblum about the evaluation. I know this was brought up last time. I wondered if it was possible for an employee's job description to be integrated somehow into the evaluation. I thought also that, of course, it could be a daunting process, but perhaps not. But the prospect of reviewing job descriptions regularly, maybe every 3 to 5 years, to make changes or updates where needed. I know, this was part of our conversation last week that sometimes people's jobs change and their job descriptions don't change with it. So it feels like it would be helpful to reference that at least as part of the evaluation. The other part that I find challenging is that, and why a job description might be helpful, is that from one department to the next, and even employees within the same department, it's like apples and oranges. We have different standards, expectations. I mean, the standards is, we all have high standards for our employees, but the responsibilities, the skills are different. So another reason why, that might be useful. The other thing I was really struck with, I am one of those employees, department heads who gives above expectations and exceptional on the performance evaluation for the 2 employees that I supervise. And I really feel as though they deserve it. They work incredibly hard. The problem, or the question I had was, I wonder if that should even be on the evaluation. The reason being is, if you have an employee who works incredibly hard, who performs at very high levels every year, chances are they're going to perform at that level every year, versus having, one exceptional year. And the other thing is, and I think Mr. Parent brought this up last week, was that meets expectations, above expectations, and exceptional does not mean that a department head doesn't feel as though there's room for improvement. I think by virtue of the fact that there's never, no one is ever going to know everything there is to know, and there's no such thing as perfection. There's always going to be room for improvement. So I guess I just sat back wondering, what is the evaluation really trying to evaluate? Maybe it would make sense to have recognition of exceptional employees, or highlight something exceptional that an employee did outside of the evaluation process in some other way. I'm not sure what that would be. Or maybe it's just simply a matter of something that was highlighted last week, which is to put some more emphasis on every employee's evaluation, areas for improvement. Because again, I feel as though, even for a person who is going above and beyond, their job responsibilities, there is still room for improvement. The only other 2 questions that I had were more logistical. One was, I wondered if there was a mechanism for residents to share if they had dissatisfaction with a department or an employee. That could open a can of worms, but I just heard a few comments last week that a couple of people were saying that they felt that, there was room for improvement. And I just think it would be important for a department head to know that. And then the last one, I think there was a little conversation about this too. There's a section asking for goals for the coming year. There's 2 columns. One says target date for completion, and right next to it, it says proposed date of completion. And I have no idea what the difference is between those two. And I know, I remember there were some comments about department heads just filling in the same exact date. I was one of those folks who did that because I didn't quite understand what the difference was or what was being asked there. So I just wanted to pose that question as well. I think that's all I wanted to say. I think I reiterate what I said last week, and I think is being brought forward again this week, that having a liaison would help us as department heads ensure that we're doing what the personnel board is looking for. But I also heard members of the personnel board last week saying that they didn't know many employees, and I think that increased communication would help the personnel board know who the employees are and how these evaluations are being filled out. So I still think that that would be a wonderful idea. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to go ask if there are any comments or questions for Sarah, and I go to Jay Dietz first since we are going to lose him in about 10 minutes. Comments, questions for Sarah?
I do like the idea. I just don't know how we could facilitate it, of getting town people's, I don't know what it's called, their feedback on people, whether it's DPW or Park and Rec and stuff like that. Because I mean, at the end of the day, our taxes do pay their salaries. So it'd be good to get that feedback. I just don't know how we can incorporate that into their actual review. As far as looking for areas to improve on and stuff like that, we could make 100 different columns, but managers should be putting that into when they're filling out all of the different things and they're filling out all of their comments on it. If there is room for improvement, they should be adding that into their comments. It
Right.
doesn't have to be a bucket for it. If there's not a bucket for it, doesn't mean they don't have to answer the question. But I mean, we could make that form be 3 pages long. We were trying to make it shorter for ease of use for everybody. But if we're going to have to make it a long version and people just aren't giving us the information we want, then we might have to go back and change the form and make it extremely long and just get every little detailed piece of information out of it. I mean, for job descriptions, I don't think we would be qualified enough to change the job descriptions as the people are doing the job. That's going to have to be on the department heads and the managers, because they're the ones that are managing the person and seeing the job evolve. We only see it when a new job comes up, or if there's or if they're changing into a job, or if we're looking at the review and stuff like that. But we don't generally see the job evolving, and we don't change the descriptions as it's going.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please, Sarah.
Okay. I was thinking that would be the task of a department head along with the employee, just to be routinely looking at those job descriptions. And I guess
Which they should do every year.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it feels like it would make sense to do that as part of the performance evaluation. I don't know. I can't speak for other department heads, but I don't routinely have a set time of year that I'm doing that unless I need to. So I think that it would be helpful to have it, at least referenced, or make, a recommendation that department heads do that, and boards and committees. And then I share, I share your same thoughts on the evaluation. I actually appreciated the changes that were made and the length. perhaps, you know, what's happening for me is that in our department, we may be unique, I don't know, but there's few parameters on the work that we do. So it's hard to evaluate somebody on a standard when, you know, human services is so broad, if that makes sense. And so I can take your feedback about, you know, including areas for improvement and putting those in each of the sections. And, you know, I can't remember exactly what was shared last week, but there was a comment about putting more emphasis on goal setting or a section specifically on areas for growth for each employee.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on the job description piece because I don't think this is different in the town than it is anywhere else. What happens is job descriptions get drafted when the job is created and they get filed away someplace and no one looks at them again.
Right.
And I think Sarah's point is a good one. A manager should be looking at these on a regular basis. And at the time of evaluation, it's a good time to do it, to look at what the evaluation said, what the job description says, and how the individual's performing vis-a-vis that job description. And if there are changes in the job, then the job description should be revised. But again, I'm not being critical of the managers here. This happens everywhere. People do these and file them away because it's something that has to be in the file. But I think if we make more of an effort to keep those updated and do pull them out when we're doing the evaluations, I think it would help everybody involved in making sure that we're assessing the employee based on what the employee is actually supposed to be doing.
Well,
To that point, I'll just say, so we had zeroed in on this last year when we were going to be undertaking the discussion on the new performance evaluation form. And we asked Ms. Hale to pull together all of the job descriptions and put them in a binder. Members of the board who wanted a physical binder got a physical binder, those that wanted it electronically. And the idea was that when we were looking at the salary requests and the annual reviews, we would have the job descriptions with us, and we have those binders. I don't know that they've been updated, and we can have a discussion and ask Vanessa if she can help us update those if there's new job descriptions. But we were supposed to have those with us, and then I think one of the things that became apparent to us is that the reviewers were not looking at the job. So that's the second piece. We have the job descriptions. We look at them when we're reviewing the reviews, but I'm not sure the reviewers are actually looking at them when they do the reviews. So we had to take it a step back, but we do have those in binders. We started to get that organized. Just not sure the message got to the managers that we expect them to pull out the job reviews. So I'm sorry, Dorian, did you have something?
Well, we do the quadrennial review, so those are updated, those job descriptions are updated every 4 to 5 years by law. The
No,
manager,
they're not.
well, we just did the quadrennial review, so those, the job
we didn't.
descriptions we have. What did we just do for the study with all the schedules?
The town, just sorry, not to interrupt, but I don't want it on the record that we did something that we didn't do. So in 2015, before any of us were on the board, they adopted a new compensation and classification system. So the review, we did not do that again. So we haven't had a quadrennial review. This would be the 5th year.
What did we just do with Joelle? Was it a
Joellen,
quadrennial review?
that was part-time job descriptions only.
Just the part-time. Okay, so we
Schedule
just did
C.
part-time descriptions and those are done, what, every 4 to 5 years where we have to do that review, correct?
Just because the SAP doesn't say you update the job descriptions every 4 years. Even if it did, it doesn't mean that we do it or that it has been done.
When we do that review, my understanding is that's when we were doing the job description. So I was going to suggest that if the job description changes as the managers are working with their employees, they should note the changes in the job descriptions and then let us know what those are so that we all can be kept up to date as to any changes to everybody's descriptions.
Quadrennial review is the responsibility of the Personnel Board under Section 16 to stay abreast of salaries and make sure that we're keeping current on salaries. It does not say explicitly that it is a review of job descriptions.
I understand that, but I'm saying that we should do it. That if the manager adds something or deletes something from a job description with an employee, if they noted it and let us know, that would help us keep more on top of our job descriptions.
Sure, and but just to be clear, the quadrennial review is the responsibility of the Personnel Board. If to do and again, we're going to be having a discussion. This is the year that we approved. If you were at town meeting, you know, is questioned about the bump in our budget, and that was covered a quadrennial review, which we also hoped would be a MIPA audit. And this was the year we were going to do it. Of course, COVID, and we can have that discussion later. So just to be clear, if the board decides that to do the review, to fulfill our obligation, to do a review, we need something from the department heads, then it's up to us to communicate that. Separately, all
Betsy, I
job
gotta
descriptions.
jump off, unfortunately.
Okay, Jay. Good luck with your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Separately, Dorianne, if we decide that we need something, we can tell the department heads. Separately, all job descriptions need to be approved by the Personnel Board. So that's a separate thing. As you said, if somebody's revising a job description, it needs to come to us to be part of the official job description. The
Right,
one
but
that,
we need to work with the department heads to make sure that the job descriptions are accurate and they are up to date. We have to
Yes,
work
ma'am.
with the department heads, Betsy. We can't do it on our own and they can't do it on their own. We have to work together. So my suggestion was, as the jobs change or don't change, that the department heads stay on top of that, make notations, and maybe update the Personnel Board. There's been a slight change in this job description. We've added this to it. But to keep us abreast of what is going on and any changes so that we all are on the same page. That's all I'm
Well,
suggesting. I'm
I
not,
think we're going to be getting to that topic when we talk about liaisons. Last week, we agreed to improve communication. The first step is to assign liaisons. This week is the first step was hearing feedback. I didn't know last week we would receive feedback. Hearing that feedback, letting the department heads have their say, talking with them, and then letting them get on to their jobs. And the second half of this meeting will be us discussing, now that we've appointed liaisons, we'll discuss the assignment, what is it that we want to communicate? So I think your comment here is germane to the second half of the discussion, which is what do we want to be communicating with our department heads? And job descriptions are an important starting point. I think we all agree. Are there any other comments for Sarah specifically?
No.
Okay. Anybody have anything, any comments in general about the discussion before we get into the liaisons and that kind of thing? I did actually want to address, I see Mark Purple is with us. Good morning, Mr. Purple. I wanted to see if we could get an answer to Sarah's question about the goal table that says target date and proposed date. And Dorianne had addressed this last week. She was concerned that the two dates were the same. And I apologize, I don't think I scrutinized this when we approved the form. Mr. Purple, would you be able to speak to what was meant by target date and proposed date on the final page of the evaluation form and why those fields are there, and are they supposed to be the same thing?
Yeah, I think I would fall on the same sword that you just fell on, Madam Chair. That basically, I mean, if it's a prospective goal, then your target date for completion and your actual date for completion are really going to be the same until the goal is done. So I don't think they should both, I don't think both of those should be there.
All right. So when we look at the next couple of months, when we revisit the form and tweak it, probably it should say target date and then actual date, right?
No, well, because your target date, your actual date really can't be filled in until the end of the evaluation year.
Okay,
So I don't know whether there needs to be something there at all, you know, whether it's just one column at this point.
target date or proposed date, and
Right.
we'll pick which one. Okay. Good to know. I'll make a note of that for the PE discussion. So, Ms. Castle, thank you for bringing that to our attention. There really is something that needs attention, and I guess it's one date for now. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Purple. So at least we can answer one of the questions on the list. All right, so, sure, any other attendees who wish to comment on last week's meeting or this week's discussion? We have anybody who has a comment? All right, then moving on, I distributed this morning an assignment sheet.
I didn't see it.
Did everybody see it?
No.
I sent it out by email. I apologize to the board. I didn't get a packet out to you because we met last week and then I had an intervening holiday. So I sent out assignments. You recall last week, I asked everybody to send me their requests. There was some overlap. I did the best I could to give each member at least 2 of their choices. There are 19 departments or committees with SAP employees. If you do the math, that means 4 of us get 4 departments or committees, and 1 person gets 3. And I made that Barry gets 3 because one of his departments is the library, and that's the biggest single employer. So I thought maybe that could count for 2 departments. So I made the following assignments. Assessors, Dorian Jasinski. Board of Health, Betsy Rosenblum. Board of Selectmen, Jay Dietz. Building Zoning, Dave Nixon. Conservation, Betsy Rosenblum. EDC, Betsy Rosenblum. Facilities, Dorian Jasinski. Fire, Jay Dietz. And I also just put in J for police. We have a similar situation between fire and police. We have very little SAP presence in those departments. And as they're both in the public safety realm, I thought it made sense to do fire and police with 1 liaison, and that is Jay Dietz. Library is Barry Rubenstein. Planning is Dave Nixon. Like I said, police is Jay Dietz. Jay is also Public Works, also known as DPW. Recreation, Barry Rubenstein. Senior Center, Dave Nixon. Technology, Betsy Rosenblum. Town Accountant, Dorian Jasinski. Town Clerk, Dave Nixon. Treasurer Collector, Dorian Jasinski. And Youth and Family Services, Betsy Rosenblum. And I'll be posting that assignment list after the meeting with the minutes. Any questions on the assignments? Did you get that?
Yep.
Okay. So moving forward, I think we all agreed last week there needs to be improvement and it needs to start with the board. And we agreed that it needs to start with communication. And I think what we've heard today is it needs to start with job descriptions. So if you recall, last year we asked Ms. Hale to collect up all the job descriptions, reminding everybody that Ms. Hale does not have jurisdiction. Her jurisdiction is under the Board of Selectmen. She does a lot of work with different committees, but she doesn't do the hiring. So there may be job descriptions out there that Vanessa doesn't have. We hope she gave us all of them. And she gave those to us in October 2019, and I made an index of them and I sent that out to everybody. And I'm looking at my index and we have a lot of job descriptions that either don't have a date on them or are old or have something called system dating. So I think the first step is understanding what job descriptions exist, right? A review starts with an inventory. And as of November 22nd last year, I had done an inventory, and you should all have that. I can send it to you again. It was in your binder. So if you've got a physical binder, you should have an inventory. It looks like this. And I just went through everything Vanessa gave me. And a lot of them don't have dates. And I'm not quite sure why job descriptions wouldn't have dates. But the first thing I would ask is if we could, maybe I could work with Vanessa on whoever created these, see if they can figure out when they were done. Oh, the assist, now, do we still have Sarah with us? I don't know if she logged off. The first one on the list, Assistant Director of Youth and Family Service, doesn't have a date. So maybe in the department records, it has a date, but it's not known to us. The second issue is the system dating. So I don't know if you're familiar with system dating. When I received these job descriptions from Vanessa, I was reviewing all of them, and that was a multi-day task. And when I would click on them, the date would change. And I said, I don't know. So if I was looking at them on August 31st, the date of the document in the footer was August 31st. And then I put the assignment down and I picked it up again on September 2nd. And lo and behold, the date of the job description was September 2nd. And I had never heard of that. I researched it and found out there is such a thing as system dating, which means that the document date is the date that your computer recognizes. So every time you open your computer, the document dates to the day you're looking at it, which is that day. So I had a discussion with Vanessa and asked her to please turn off system dating. I would ask the same for Mr. Purple. If any job descriptions are being generated with system date, it's causing a lot of confusion. And I think I discussed that with Vanessa in 2017 and 2018, because I had found it on some other documents, but it cropped up again in connection with several of the job descriptions. And I can review that with Vanessa. I can send her the list, and maybe we could get some real dates on those job descriptions. So, and maybe each one of us as a liaison, our communication could start with just looking at the job descriptions and figuring out what we have. Second thing, I guess it's up for the board to decide if you want to start communicating with your departments before we have a concrete message. After last week, I was kind of thinking we should have a message. We should agree on our expectations before we go forth and start talking to departments. But then I received the very valuable input from Ms. Castle and from Ms. LeFrancois. And I really think the expectations need to be as a result of the dialogue. I think the dialogue should come first. I did get some feedback and from other folks, not department heads, after the meeting. And it's not clear to me if folks want to go on the record at this point. So suffice to say, I received feedback from citizens who were paying attention, who thought that some of the frustration and issues that we were having were influenced by what they called a difference in culture between the private sector and the public sector. And it seems to me there may be some of that going on. I myself hail from the private sector. We're in a public sector, and some of that culture could be differences in culture, could be responsible for some of this. So I think in order to proceed, maybe we need to get out of our own private backgrounds and experiences. I did do some reading about public versus private sector culture, and I think the suggestion that there's something there is definitely worth exploring. A related point that came to my attention in the reading that I did, as one author put it, quote, people from different disciplines can come to the same problem from very different perspectives. And the author went on to say that people's perspectives are influenced by training, education, and experience. And the particular article I was reading related to professionals in different disciplines at Harvard. So the writer's advice was go across the river. So we don't have a river here. Maybe our advice is go across Route 9 or cross one of the construction sites. But clearly, whether we're talking about cultural differences or differences in perspective, I'm thinking the first step is to just start talking and figure out what it is the department heads think about the process. And we've heard from two of them, and maybe we just need to get more input before this board formulates ultimately what its expectations are going to be. So I would recommend that we start a dialogue and ask some questions and then reconvene in October if that makes sense to folks. Maybe I want to hear from you. Maybe you think we need to get a more concrete list of expectations out there. I'm not sure. I think maybe the list of expectations comes after the dialogue. So I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I mean, I certainly think there's something to the distinction between cultures. And certainly for me, coming from the private sector, it's been very eye-opening seeing what happens, at least in this town, and I suspect in other public settings. For me, I think we have to make a decision what direction we want to go in. I think we, meaning members of this committee, have been moving towards a more merit-based system, because I think that's where most of us have spent our careers, in merit-based systems. I guess an argument can be made that what we have witnessed here works here. That is, we really don't have a merit-based system, but we don't need a merit-based system, that people are happy with everybody getting the same increase, that based on looking at the evaluations, performance levels are acceptable. So why are we trying to switch from something that's been working all of this time to something that we as members of the personnel board may be more comfortable with, but are problematic in terms of implementing them in this environment? And, you know, I hadn't really thought about that until you just made the point, because again, my mindset is, well, of course you want to go to a merit-based system, because there are a lot of good reasons for doing that, but maybe, or at least I'm open now to the argument that maybe we're better off just keeping the status quo and not trying to make all these changes, which are going to be disruptive, probably cause upset among employees. Certainly, we're seeing it among managers. So maybe we're rocking a boat that doesn't need to be rocked. So that's just my observation.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. And it does occur to me, even as we set up a liaison system, that we're rocking the boat in the time of a pandemic. And I'm thinking in terms of job descriptions, which I think we all agree need attention. I had asked Vanessa if she would outline her hiring process for me, because we all agree that a hiring process starts with a job description. And the few times that when this board has been called upon to assist with that, recreation department comes to mind when they were hiring rec director. They came to us and we worked with them in a positive manner, I think, on the job description. So Vanessa is in the process of outlining her hiring process for us. Thank you, Ms. Hale. She sent me an email, a preliminary email. There was a lot of information there. And I asked her to take her time, and she's going to finalize her hiring process and put the info in a memo for our October meeting. So thank you, Vanessa, for that. And one of the points she made in her email was she doesn't handle the hiring process for all the departments. And that's an important point. Along with this public-private culture issue, we have independent boards who are doing their own hiring. So for example, this board just passed on the raise of Ms. Amico, our public health nurse. If you look in your job description binder, you will not find a job description for a public health nurse. You will find a job description in the part-time schedule for a senior center nurse. And this was back in 2018 when Joellen did her job descriptions. It was the same person, Ms. Chamberlain. Ms. Chamberlain has now retired as public health nurse, and Ms. Amika was with us. And by all accounts, we are very grateful that she is with us, but we don't have a job description for her. And I understand from Ms. Hale, that would be the responsibility of the Board of Health. So I think a really important first step is to just all get on board. And then the second thing Vanessa told me is that as we would expect, the job descriptions are a very important part of the hiring process that she does participate in. I think it was step 1 or 2 or 3 on her list is to look at the job description. So my next question would be, wouldn't it be interesting to take a look at our recent hires for the last couple years and see if we actually updated the job descriptions? I don't have the information on the new hires. That's something Vanessa supplies for us. So maybe if she has time, I would ask her to take a look at the new hires that she's been involved in the last couple years and see if anybody actually even looked at the job descriptions and updated them, because I can't remember how many have come our way. So I think there's some basic work that everyone can agree on that needs to be done with job descriptions before we even get started with anything else. And I think that's a basic function that wouldn't, to use Barry's term, rock the boat right now, and might be a good starting place for our liaisons. And the second thing is we're coming up on a year with the performance evaluation tool. Again, not a real boat rocker, but to have a dialogue with our managers about issues they have with the review. Ms. Castle raised a good one this morning. Mr. Purple talked to folks about this review, but it's been in use for almost a year. So what are concerns about the reviews after a year? What did the managers like about the review form? What isn't working? And maybe we could start our dialogue with that. So I'm not trying to delay deciding whether we go to a merit system or really shake things up, but I think there's some fertile ground for just getting on the same page, just about the performance evaluation and about the JDs that could occupy our time. Dave has a comment?
Yeah, I did. I've just got a couple of questions. Basically, what we noted and questioned initially when all the reports came in was the fact that no one was rated below meets expectations, which got us to kind of question a little bit what was going on. So I guess the question for the department heads is does meet expectations really mean anything if the expectation is not too high? Is the expectation high enough? And then the concept that like one size fits all, is that acceptable? And is that the standard that would be used in every department? I don't know. Again, I do come from the private sector, but I also dealt with employees all the way from manual labor in a sawmill to office personnel and sales personnel on the road. So there has to be some flexibility in there, and maybe it's a question of creating different ways of rating people within different departments, depending on whether they're office personnel versus laborers or what. I just bring that up as something to think about.
I think your comment, Dave, speaks to the point about, we heard from Mr. Parent last week. We heard a little of it this week. Meets expectations doesn't mean someone is perfect. The issue that I have, and maybe this is the issue you had, is nobody noted where the improvement needed to be. We just heard meets expectations.
Period.
The second thing I think feeds into this, and this was something that was raised by Mr. Stivers, I don't know if he's still with us, at one of the goal setting meetings at Board of Selectmen. They talked about reviews, specifically having input into Board of Selectmen reviews. But even beyond that, Mr. Stivers raised the issue of these are municipal employees, and Jay noted this morning, we pay their salaries. Is there any, and Sarah asked, is there any mechanism for feedback from the public? And Mr. Stivers raised this question, and my impression, everybody at the Board of Selectmen's meeting was wearing masks, but it didn't seem to me from the tenor of the discussion that folks thought that would be easy to do or feasible. I don't know, Sam, if you want to comment, because it's coming up again, and it seems to me maybe something like a complaint box, the virtual complaint box, because meets expectations to me and for other members of the board, for a public servant, is courtesy and excellent service to the public. We expect nothing less. And that kind of butts up against the needs improvement. And I'd be happy if Mr. Stivers wanted to comment on, if you wanted to speak for a minute, Sam. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you did raise customer feedback for the Board of Selectmen. I don't know if you want to mention that.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Sam. You have the
Thanks.
floor.
I certainly am not speaking officially for the Board of Selectmen, but my own personal view was that I think that it's useful if we can collect that kind of input from a customer service standpoint. My experience with that is that it tends often to be biased toward negative feedback, unfortunately. But I think you need to sort of understand that context and weigh that appropriately as you consider it in terms of performance. But you do also get a reasonable amount, and I've found, of positive feedback. This person was extraordinarily helpful, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems to me that that it is useful to some degree in terms of the evaluation process. I think it's also useful for a message to the public to say that we're interested in that kind of feedback and that we recognize that public does pay salaries of town staff, and we're interested in doing what we can to get the best possible customer service level. So I don't think that has been the topic of ongoing conversation. We've not talked about it since we raised the topic in the goal setting session, but there are some personnel related issues on our list of goals. If you look in our packet from last evening, for example, I think I see it as great progress in terms of listing goals that came out of that session. And we've got one page that lists several dozen of them and a tracking system to represent, are we doing anything on this particular area? And are we making progress with it, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's my understanding that our plan is to continue to update that going forward. And several of those are related to personnel management and performance evaluation. So I think that's a great step forward. And I'm personally happy to get input from any source to consider as part of the process. But again, being careful about how you weight it and making sure that you don't overreact to input from different areas, but balance out across a wide set of inputs. So that's my pitch there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I just have a couple of questions. I wasn't able to watch your meeting last night. I don't know if others were. Was there any discussion about a possible date for the joint meeting with this board?
Not last night.
Okay.
But we've talked about it previously, and I know Mr. Healy is eager to have that happen. So
Okay. Well, we'll stay tuned, and I will try to get with Mr. Healy and get a date for that. I believe October was something that was in the air.
Yep,
And my
I've
second
not heard
question,
specifically, so, but he's the right person to talk with. So please follow up with him.
I will. And my second question for you, Sam, on this topic of citizen feedback, have you, or to your knowledge, any other member of the Board of Selectmen has anybody done any research to see if other towns have a mechanism for collecting this sort of feedback in the municipal sector?
Not to my knowledge, but that's a good
Okay.
idea. I generally think we ought to look around on many issues to figure out, are people doing this in ways that might be useful for us. Ms. Hale may have some ideas there.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Vanessa. Yeah, you are very tied in with the municipal employee sector. Anything you want to
Sure.
share with us?
Sure, I think there are mechanisms we can implement through our website and certainly, in-person comments, et cetera. Tom Laflamme also has his hand raised, so I wanted to jump to him if that would be okay with the board. I think he may have some feedback on the same topic.
Yeah, just one question. Thank you, Tom, before we get to you. So I guess my question for you, Vanessa, is there a mechanism? And I appreciate, thank you very much, that if the personnel board or Board of Selectmen or jointly the boards want to make this happen, technologically, we could make it happen. And thank you for that. I guess my question is, do you have any knowledge of other communities in Massachusetts who do this?
no, but I can certainly do that research fairly quickly. What is common in some communities is more of a 360 review process where peers might be submitting comment on someone's review or performance or projects that may have been accomplished that year. That's more common at the employee level, subordinates, and department head level. As far as soliciting comment from taxpayers, I'm not aware of that, but I can certainly find that information out from our state association.
Would it be possible for you to prepare a little brief for us on this 360 review process that you hear about in other towns? Because I don't know anything about that. I don't know
Sure.
about anyone else.
Yep, I'll do that for the October meeting.
Yeah, that would be great. Because, time and time again, the experience of other people could be helpful. Or the fact that nobody else in 320 towns in Massachusetts is doing something that also, I don't know what that tells us, but. All right, Mr. Laflamme, you had a comment. Thank you for being here, Tom.
Yeah, so to Vanessa's point, yes, there are definitely technological ways of collecting that information. My concern would be, much to what Sam was raising, including those in an employee's review. First of all, not everyone is public facing, right? So, not everyone has that benefit of interacting with the public. But also, again, I think putting any kind of negative feedback from the public on a one-off as it's presented, it is very dangerous to put that in a permanent record. I think every interaction, there's two sides to it. And, what is reported may not be the full story of what happened. So I would just use a lot of caution with that. As a department manager, and luckily I'm bringing on staff. I definitely want to take that type of feedback from the people that the department serves to improve the department. But I don't think that it necessarily needs to go into permanent record for the employee. So sorry about the dog.
And perhaps this is something Ms. Hale or Mr. Purple could speak to. There may even be laws involved in how we document these sorts of things. I don't know. Beyond my expertise now. Are there laws, Mr. Purple, Ms. Hale, if you know, that govern putting this sort of feedback? I guess if it got into the realm of, someone doing something illegal or immoral, whatever that may be, and you start to get beyond just strictly performance, then that's not something in the, discipline, allegations of misconduct really go beyond this board. So I guess what we would just be talking about is your run-of-the-mill customer service complaint, like or comment about something good that happened. So I don't know if there are laws that govern this sort of thing.
I don't want to speak for Mr. Purple. He'll certainly chime in on his own. I don't think there are laws that govern that. As so to speak, I don't think that there's anything obviously illegal by recording something in a performance review. I would like to solicit the opinion of our Labor Council if the board wanted to go down that road.
Yeah, good idea, Vanessa. Good idea.
Yeah, the one thing I'll offer, and I do appreciate Ms. Hale calling me Mr. Purple to the formality. I'm looking around wondering who she's talking about. But when I was in Framingham, prior to them obviously becoming a city, we had a customer service program, and on every countertop we had customer service cards that people could, fill out and just send back. We use those as tools, not for evaluations, but we use them more for tools to try to improve customer service in certain areas. So they weren't used, punitively, or things like that. Whether or not they'd make them into an evaluation, I think determined whether or not message was received and behavior either corrected or addressed. I do, but so that may not be part of the evaluation process, but that gets to the customer service piece of the issue.
If I can just say, I mean, to me, customer input, whether they be internal or external, is an important part of any evaluation. And I certainly take Tom's point that you wouldn't want to see an evaluation that an individual came in and complained that X didn't do that. But if you have a pattern of conduct that's demonstrated by customer comments, I certainly think that should show up in the evaluation that there have been issues of a certain type, general statements, not specifics of what the allegations were, but general statements. And I think that's a legitimate and appropriate part of the evaluation. So, and again, I would seek the same kind of information from internal customers. If I'm the manager, I would want to talk to the people that my employees are working with, saying, what do you think of this employee? What have your interactions been like? Because I don't know how else you can make those kind of evaluations.
Thank you, Barry. So Mark and Vanessa, are you aware of any department that has this sort of feedback? I know it's a tough time now because people aren't going in and physically visiting offices and filling out cards. But prior to COVID, does anybody have a box on the desk that says, tell us how we're doing? Is that part of something? Again, one of the issues is this relates to how managers are managing. And a lot of the managers of SAP employees are contract employees. So let's say there's an issue in a department, there's a pattern with an employee, but that employee's manager is not an SAP employee. We can't address it with the SAP employee. That would be for whoever addresses the manager's performance evaluation. But I'm just interested to know if any of the departments currently have customer feedback forms.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so we really are talking about rocking the boat. Right? We have here employees who go back 2 decades and it's never been done before. So it sounds like a simple matter and something that Barry or I might expect, or Dave might expect, or Dorian, but it ain't never been done yet. So the question is, how do we want to proceed, and how do we proceed during a pandemic? Yes, Vanessa.
I just wanted to let you know that Ryan Donovan is in the audience and has raised his hand.
Mr. Donovan, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. You have the floor.
I just wanted to make one small quick comment, if that's okay. When I did get to the library, we did have a box where people could comment. We maintained those for several years when I was here. We tried to switch over to an online form. Originally, we were gonna call it a complaint form, but when I talked about it with the employees in a staff circle, we decided to make it a feedback form. We thought that would be a little bit better because then if people wanted to say something nice, they could. I think we've given out the form maybe 3 or 4 times. We've had it for, I wanna say 3.5 years. And no one has ever returned it to us with feedback. So, that is just, I want to say, because I don't think Miss Hale or Mr. Purple were aware that the library did try to actively solicit feedback. We do try to periodically do surveys to the public where we don't go into specific customer service feedback, but often we have open-ended questions where people do give feedback on how much they like interacting with the staff, how great the staff is. And those are typically the surveys that are part of our strategic planning process. We do make publicly available so people could view those. I'm happy to send the plans to you if you wanted to review. Most of the comment section do include, I would say, anecdotally pleasant items about how great the library staff is, which as the manager, I always really love reading. You know, I don't think I get a lot of negative feedback about my staff. I think that says a lot about the staff at the library. So that would just be my comment to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. That is helpful. Are there any other department heads out there that would like to comment on customer feedback and whether or not they'd like to get it if they're not currently getting it? Anybody else, Vanessa, who's looking to make a comment?
No other raised hands.
Thank you, Vanessa. So I think we could probably talk all day, but I don't want to talk all day. I would like to give a kind of focus to this so we can move forward. I still like the idea of having everybody reach out to their departments and start a dialogue, looking at job descriptions, looking at the PE form. I'd like to hear the perspectives of the managers. I'd also like to explore with the managers what meet expectations means to them and whether or not they would feel comfortable specifying those areas in which meet expectations means that someone is not perfect, and the important areas where you would like them to improve, and whether or not we can put a field like that on the form that focuses on where, because I think if I'm understanding the sense of this board, we need to hear more about where meet expectations, what that means. And it's helpful to hear from a department head that you understand that your understanding is that means someone's not perfect. But I think what the board is saying is we need to have a better elucidation and understanding of what needs improvement. It's not just enough to say meet expectations means someone's not perfect. So I'd like to see us explore that. And then I'd like to see us come back as a board in October and talk about what we've learned. When we can also explore when we talk to our department heads and committee chairs about the customer feedback form. It may be the case that we start to try to collect that data without knowing exactly how it's going to be used. It would be nice to have the feedback. Maybe, mindful of some of the things that have been said, we don't immediately start putting it into reviews. But it's certainly a legitimate thing to start collecting. And if we decide that it needs to undergo some kind of adjudication before we put it in forms, fine. But I don't think it can hurt to have a dialogue with department heads and managers about having what is going to be a virtual feedback form. And maybe our experience will be the same, their experience will be the same as the library. There won't be much there. But maybe what will emerge is, some sort of indicators that there may be some departments that need to pay attention to that. So I don't mind having a discussion about customer feedback, even though we're not entirely sure where it's going to lead. I would be clear with department heads, we're not planning to take a complaint and put it in a review. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is just putting our toe in the water and starting to try to understand a little bit about customer feedback. I don't think that would be violative of anything. So are folks, board members, ready to start having a dialogue and then come back here in October and talk about what they've learned? Or do you want to continue here today to refine exactly what it is you want to say? Because it's not clear to me exactly what we're going to say. I just outlined 6 areas where I think we could start. Or do you want to go forward with a specific script?
I think we could initially just get a sense of things within the departments that are assigned to us. And
Okay.
then when we have our next get together, exchange a few of the individual senses of the departments, and then come up with a plan of action after that.
All right, thanks. So again, that would be talking about the performance evaluation form, looking at how we can help them manage their job descriptions, and report back at the October meeting, and whether or not they would be interested in a customer feedback form, what issues that presents for them, and the other things that what they'd like to see changed in the form, and report back in October. Speaking of which, we need to calendar an October meeting.
Okay.
We can do that at this time. The second Wednesday in October would be October 14th. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah,
All
Yep.
right, October 14th at noon. Anything else, Dorianne? I know you had some strong opinions early in the meeting about what you'd like to see. Have we covered that in terms of our initial discussions with department heads? Want to make sure we get back to your points about what you want to start communicating?
No, I think you just need to stay on top of the job descriptions. I think it's an important part of the SAP employees' evaluations and how they're being looked at by their department heads. So that was my biggest point there. So if there's a change, they should be noted and they should let us know what it is. But we may want to talk about that part of this with the departments we've been assigned to as liaisons. Updating the job descriptions.
Yep. Yeah, so we're going to talk about job descriptions with them. We're going to talk about performance evaluation form, what's working, what's not working, what they'd like to retain, what they would like to not retain. I found the feedback from Ms. LeFrancois was very sobering for me. The idea that over a period of 2 decades, this conversation just keeps happening with successive boards and doesn't get resolved. So I have to ask myself why that is, and how will this board in this incarnation in a pandemic be able to improve on something? And for that, I guess we will rely on the perspective of our longtime employees. And it would be helpful to hear from them, so. But again, if we're just reaching out to the managers about performance reviews, we may not be getting the perspective of all the employees. So do we want to go beyond department managers and talk to the employees as well?
I think that's something we should discuss later.
After we have the initial?
Right.
Okay, sounds good, Dave. All right, so we've scheduled a meeting for October 14th. Please try to do your initial outreach and please take notes that you can share with us. And please do tell your department heads and the folks that you speak to who are managed. So for some of you, there will be 2 contacts for each department. And that is, for example, Dave, on building and zoning, you have 2 contacts.
Mhm.
One will be Mr. Purple, who does the review for the department head, Ms. Lavoli. And then Ms. Lavoli does reviews for her subordinates. So some of you may have to, oh, Dave, again, senior center. You have Mr. Harrington of the Council on Aging, who does the review of the director, Ms. LeFrancois. And then your other contact is Ms. LeFrancois herself, who does reviews of the other
Right,
employees.
right.
Okay. Any questions for board members? Anybody else present? Are we ready to wrap up the meeting?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to everybody who attended and had input. We appreciate it. And we'll see you back on October 14th at noon. And I think we are gavelled out at 1:16 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Stay
you.
well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.